I will send you a copy of this document, even though I'm embarrassed at the current state, because some sections are just cut and pasted, like
From
from
other
other
things.
documents that I wrote.
Yeah.
Some are just stream of consciousness that I just basically my notes, and then other sections are like completely written, like in copy edited, So it's kind of a
Hmm.
mixed bag. So it's not a um, it's not a document that I'm proud of at this point,
Right.
but it's a starting point. And I firmly believe, and this could be a whole topic for a conversation too. At some point, you just got to put yourself out there, and you got
Yeah.
to become vulnerable and expose your work, share your work with people, even though it's not ready. And that's how you get better.
And I think you're right. There's a lot of times I've put myself and I vacillate back and forth on it. I would get very conservative and not willing to put myself out there, and then other times I'm like, no, I just have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think I know I get better when I take the leap of faith.
Yeah. Well, I think this is. I don't know if you're a fan of Stephen Pressfield or if you're familiar with him, but his famous book is The War of Art. But I like he has a shorter version of it. It's a very similar book. It's called Do the Work. I'm sure I've
I
recommended that
think
to you.
I've got it. In fact,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the book I had. Do the work. It's the one
Yeah.
I got over there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a real short one. I love to read. Yeah, it's a really
Yeah.
great one.
Yeah. He's very blunt. I
Mhm.
like. I mean, but he speaks from experience because he's a
Right.
very successful author,
Hmm.
and he talks of and he one of the so he's written, I think, a lot of fiction books, but he's popular among authors as well because he writes books on the creative process, and those are
Yeah,
his two famous ones, The
yeah,
War
and
of
that's
Art.
it. Do the
Yeah,
work is
Do
his
the Work.
famous one. I really love his concept of stream of consciousness and um, the way he basically encapsulates imagination, if you will. And innovation and imagination are just incredibly important.
Yeah, and he talks about the the demons
Yes.
essentially that creative people have, right? And he personifies it in
Hmm.
this creature called resistance.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And resistance is real.
And
Resistance is
very.
what keeps you from sharing your work with people. I mean,
Mhm.
resistance keeps you from creating the work to begin with. It puts all
Yep.
these bad ideas in your head, like self doubt and like, oh, nobody's going to want to hear what I have to say, or I can't, what makes me think I could write something that people will read, or, I'm too busy to do this, or it'll give you 1,000 excuses,
Yep.
and you gotta shut it up, and you got to shut it up every day. It never goes away, you know. And he even says this. He says, no matter how successful you become, resistance never goes away. It's a battle that you have to fight anew every single day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I try to fight it, right? I try to fight it by being productive with writing, which is difficult for me, but these conversations are helping me tremendously. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I found a little cheat code, a little loophole. But then sharing it is also important. You got to, like, I recorded a little video last night, just, and it was a section of the document actually, and I just thought it could be self-contained on motivating people. And I just posted on LinkedIn. I was like, you know what? If people don't like it, they don't like it. You know, whatever. It's
Yeah.
just me
Yeah.
talking for
Yeah.
15 seconds, right? Or 30 seconds or whatever it is. And at the last minute, it took me a minute. I'll admit this. It took me a minute to click post, because I was like thinking, nobody's going to want to see my dumb face, talking about something random here. And it's like posting a video to LinkedIn of yourself talking, all these voices in your head telling you not to do it. And then I think I remembered Stephen Pressfield and this whole concept. I'm like, you know what? It's like we imagine the worst things that will happen. The worst thing that'll happen is people will ignore you. Who
That's right.
cares?
You're just caught lost in the stream.
That's
Yeah.
right. There's really no downside. You gotta, if you want your ideas to be heard and to impact people, you got to put them out there.
Yeah.
And you might have to put out a bunch of bad ones before the good ones get out there, and that's just the process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about that a lot, but you're absolutely right on there. Just putting yourself out there.
Yep. And so I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to and it's it's a our minds create these mechanisms to protect ourselves from being vulnerable.
Hmm. Because we don't like to get hurt, and there's a fear portion of it, and that safety thing. So your
Yeah,
mind, as you look across the whole well, the whole part of the brain is how do I survive? How do I protect? How do I
that's right.
continue? And then there's your mental set is how do I not stand out for the tribe
Hmm.
on it? Because when I stand out for the tribe, it was kind of there was, I don't know if it was a video or what, but anyway, Darren Hardy was talking about this, and I'm sure they've been out on a number of them. Is that they put a bunch of crabs into the bottom of this cage on there, and there was on one crab kept trying to climb out, and the other crabs kept grabbing and pulling him down to the point where they actually had eviscerated this crab because it's like, well, no, you're trying to be different. You can't be different.
Right,
I think our mind twists in that and says, "Do I dare?
right.
What if? Am
Oh
I
yeah.
going? Yeah, am I going to be ostracized?"
I think it's one of the reasons why public speaking is the number one most fearful thing for for most people. I think they even like there was some study that I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely for
Hmm.
most people. And the way I say it is like unless you're a narcissist, right? If you're a narcissist, then you want to be on stage, but if not, then it's like a fear you have to overcome
Right.
in order to get good at it. And it's an
Yep.
unnatural thing for us to do. And it's exactly for the reason that you just said. It's because the way our brains are wired is to protect ourselves from
Exactly.
having a bad reputation. And every time you step on stage, you're risking creating a bad reputation. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't do a good job? You know,
Hmm.
I mean, if we were living in a tribal society with 100 people, you might get kicked out of the tribe for what you say, and you may not survive. Your
Yeah,
offspring may
likely
not
you
survive.
won't. Yeah, because you
Yeah,
don't have the rest of it. Because we're weak in comparison to the critters that are out there.
yeah.
Yeah, and the
So
other tribes. Yeah.
exactly. So I think a lot of that protection mechanism that
Mhm.
exists in our minds are not as applicable today, but they're still there, and you have to overcome it if you want to
Yes.
accomplish anything.
Exactly. Yeah, and I agree with you. They're not there anymore. I mean, what makes Apple? Why are the cult of Apple? Why do we like it so much? Because it says, "Hey, you are different, and
Right.
you're part of a culture that says, I refuse to conform." So that reaches out to a certain part of you
Yep.
on it.
Yeah. Exactly. But yet, getting on stage is terrifying for the first, I don't know, few dozen
Times.
times,
Yeah.
right? Just, for some people, it never stops being terrifying.
Yeah. For me, it depends on the size of the audience. And I really it is. It's like that. If there's 40, 50, 60 people on there, there's a moment, and then I just kind of roll with it. I don't allow myself to get really nervous about it. And when I can tell if I start hurrying things, then I say, okay, you got to slow it back down. If you're hurrying, that means you're just either trying to blow through it, or maybe you're saying too much and not allowing the audience to absorb the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very common thing. People rush it. Being able to slow yourself down, it requires a degree of self control that's very hard to have when your adrenaline's pumping,
Yeah.
when you're nervous, right? So I think a lot of it is exposure therapy.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's like just keep doing it and you'll get better at it. So many things in life are like that, right?
Oh yeah.
And the problem is nobody wants to go through that pain.
Hmm.
And I think this is kind of like a stoic idea, but it's like you got to embrace the pain to some degree.
Yep.
You know, it's almost as if because people might say, okay, you got to get over the pain. You gotta be willing to accept it. But I think at some level, to truly excel, you got to kind of like not enjoy it, but like bring it on kind of attitude. You know,
Right. Right.
like get some enjoyment out of overcoming it, and then get
Exactly.
addicted to that. Like
Hmm.
And it's interesting because there's so many things in your life that you could do that's hard. And I think the more of those things that you could get become competent in, the
Yep.
better you get at everything else.
Right.
Because it's kind of like dealing with adversity is a skill in and of itself.
It truly is. It truly is, and that's something that and how you go through it all becomes. um, I guess it's a character definition, but it's not. What's funny about it is dealing with adversity, um, like many characteristics, is something that can be learned. It's something that it's not there. It's they talk about, well, there's leaders that are born and they just naturally charismatic and they go on, and there are people that are not born but also become leaders on it. But it is not a trait that either you have it or you don't.
Right.
The somebody that is predisposed to those certain characteristics of leadership or certain characteristics of putting yourself out or
Right.
embracing adversity, yeah, they may have it an easier time, but it's not beyond anybody to learn and to continue on it. And what happens so often, and this is, I really believe, with our society today, is people want to take a shortcut. We
Yep.
don't we don't want to do the work required, and so anybody that does the work required comes out on top.
Right.
I believe that we all have a superpower, for lack of a better term. There's something that we are intrinsically good at that other people go, and we don't even think about it. That other people
Right.
go, wow, how in the world do you do that? And it's like, do what? You know, and I think that is one of the things that people need to discover, because what you're really good at, and you can use the double down factor on it, you can apply that anywhere. And then it becomes, just as you were saying, is where do you want to do the most good? So whatever your superpower is, be able to apply it down.
You want to be top 1% of your field, then yeah, you're gonna have to choose your field. you know, choose a field that has a future, and B,
Yep.
to your point, choose something that you're naturally good at as well.
Yep.
Find where those two things overlap, and then don't choose it based on like what you feel passionate about. I know this goes against conventional wisdom,
No,
but in the long run, are you going to be happy 20 years from now if you've been weaving baskets for the last 20 years?
it's
If
very
the
true.
answer is yes, then go do it. If the answer is
Yeah.
no, then you should probably think about this a
Something
little
else.
more
Yeah.
deeply, right? Because when you're young, you have a choice. You
Yep.
have more choices. You have a choice no matter how old you are. But,
Exactly.
it's kind of like if an airplane's flying 1 degree off course and it starts flying 1 degree off course, like, at the beginning of the flight, it's going to end up on the other side of the planet, right?
Yeah.
If it's 1 degree off course, for the last 5 minutes, it'll be in the same neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
So like the earlier you can decide what direction you want to go in, and by the way, by no means am I saying you can't change direction. Please
No.
change direction whenever you realize you're going in the wrong direction.
Direction.
But the
Absolutely.
earlier
Yeah.
you could do it, the more impact you're going to have on your life,
Yeah.
right? So when you're young is the right time to be thinking about this. Now, unfortunately, when you're young is the time you're least likely to be thinking about this. That's the dilemma of life, right? Youth is
Yeah,
wasted on the young type of thing. But that's why mentoring is important. That's why even creating content is important. Us as
I
old
think so.
guys, if nothing else, we could share like, our experience, the lessons we've learned. So people earlier in the process, people younger than us can maybe glean some lessons from that might be useful to them, right? Even if it's
Yep.
just sharing areas where we made mistakes.
Hmm.
Learning from other people's mistakes is a shortcut. So you don't have to learn from
Absolutely.
them
Yep.
firsthand.
Yeah, I told, it always brings me up, since, because I am a middle child. So I have three older sisters. And the thing that I always saw is when they would get into trouble, when they were making mistakes, on there, and they were, getting into serious trouble, I was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that one. And I've always carried that mindset, is that, you know, when I make mistakes, I want to pass them on to others. So
Right.
don't do as I did. I learned from that, but I want to be able to pass it on. The other thing I wanted to add is that once you know where you're going, and it's just like you said, put in the work, double down, go deep. You don't, if you want to live for excellence and you want to truly be excellent in there, then, and not just ordinary and not just average and not part of the pack on there, you got to go after it and you got to go
Yeah.
deep and you got to put in the work because none of this is easy.
Yep. That's, what book kind of sums this up well is Grant Cardone's 10X rule. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've read that one.
I haven't read that one, but I've heard of it and, the synopsis off of it. But yes.
Yeah. It's basically like whatever you think you should be doing, 10X
Yep.
it. He
And
calls it
stop doing
taking
the things
massive
you shouldn't.
action.
Yeah. And stop doing the things you shouldn't.
Well, I mean, we have a finite amount of time, so you have to,
Yeah.
right? If you're going to
Yeah.
10x the things you should be doing, there's going to be things that are lower priority that you're going to be doing less of, right? Just by nature.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For most people, that's going to be like watching television, surfing the
Yep.
internet, and
Yep.
playing video games. I think
I think
that's
you're right.
yeah. There's your source of time that you could draw from to put into other things that maybe can help you achieve your goals, right? Not that doing those things are necessarily bad, but I think that's people say they don't have time for things. There's usually they can cut out. There are some things that they could cut out. Saying yes to everything is saying no to the most important things, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. You're saying no to something else. Steve Jobs was the one that always said it. He said every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
Right.
So just be very, very careful when you say yes. And I always appreciated that advice. So I look at it and I go through the wax and wanes like we all do, but it requires some discipline to sit there. And this was another thing that I had gotten from, and I love this concept on here from Darren Hardy is he said, when somebody comes up and I thought of you and some of your when you get asked to do things, and so when somebody comes up and says, hey, in 3 weeks would you mind doing X, most of us are going to say sure, yeah, in 3 weeks, yeah, absolutely, I can take care of it. He goes, if you take it in your mind and you say, if they're asking you yes, what if X was going to happen tomorrow, what if X
Right.
was going to happen today? Would you still say yes? And the concept is that when they put something out that far, your mind isn't really grasping what is the commitment you're making in there. But if you then recalibrate your mind and say, would I say yes to it if I had to do this tomorrow?
It's it, they've done psychological experiments on this, right? The person, like when you say yes to something, 3 months from now, it's almost like that other guy's got to do it.
Yeah.
That me 3 months from now, but there's some truth to that because you are a different person, right?
True. Yeah.
Um, yeah, this is such a powerful concept, right? And so we tend to make commitments. We tend to say yes to commitments that are farther in the future, right? And we also value rewards that are less far in the future.
Exactly.
That's the converse of it, right? So if I like you say, I'll give you $1 today, or I give you $100 in 3 months, a lot of people are going to take the dollar today, right? Because that instant gratification. I mean, you can just see it in their behavior, right? Not investing, not saving, um, you know, impulse buying things. So a
Yeah.
lot of this is that psychological cognitive bias of valuing things that are right now,
Right.
which there's some value in doing that, right? Because there's uncertainty. Like
Hmm.
where are you going to be 6 months from now when you promise me that $100, right? You might not get it at all. So there is some reason where that where that can serve you, but it could also very much work against you.
Well, and this kind of goes with, and I know we're all over the place on this, but anyway, it also goes with you think about the way we eat, and the only reason I bring that up is because it goes on the same concept. We will eat all the food in front of us, because our mind is set, from back when we were hunter gatherers. Is when's that next meal coming?
Right.
If you're promising me I'll have a steak in 3 weeks and I can have a hamburger now, well, shit, I'll just eat the hamburger now, just because I don't know if I'm going to be around in 3 weeks for that
Right.
steak. But it's the same concept. But I think that trigger point is exactly the same mental model that we have along the way. Is that instant gratification is triggered off of the, if you will, a primordial survival that says, "Take it now, take it now."
Yep. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. We're wired for that. And
Yeah.
it's another example of what we were talking about before,
Yep.
of what we're, what has served us, in the past as a species, um, may have some usefulness today, but it's not as useful, and also can be a detriment. These same
Exactly.
instincts. Yeah, that's a
Yep.
great example of it. There's a couple books that are on my just like top 10 of all time. And there's a concept in one of them, I can't remember which, but one of them is Benjamin Hardy, Willpower Doesn't Work, one of my favorite
Ah,
books of all
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Amazing book. And the other one is James Clear, Atomic Habits. And I sometimes get the concepts confused between those two because I like both of those books so much and I forget which one's which. But I think it might have been Atomic Habits, but it could be either one. And there's this concept of every decision you make is a vote for who you will become in the future.
Hmm.
And start thinking, I think it sounds like an Atomic Habits type of concept.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we're talking about kind of reminds me of that,
Hmm.
And if you think about things in that way, uh, it makes it easier to make decisions that consider the long term,
Right.
you know? So like if I'm saying yes to all of these things that don't matter, I'm the way they put it is it's a vote for you're casting your vote for who you become.
Well,
Right?
it's true. No, it's a great. That's a actually a super analogy across that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
super powerful concept, right? And if you
Yeah.
start thinking about every little decision you make, like, do I eat that donut or do I don't? If I eat that donut, I'm voting for being an unhealthy, healthy person.
Hmm. Hmm.
If I decide to go to the gym, I'm casting a vote, and all those votes, like each vote, one vote's not going to matter.
No.
But when you add up all the votes, that ends up who you become,
Yep.
right? So if
Yep.
every day you cast a vote for eating a donut or cast a vote for some unhealthy thing, then you're going to become unhealthy. You're telling yourself that's who you are.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of this gets reinforced with self-image too, because say you do that unhealthy thing day in and day out, then you start identifying with being that person, and it bleeds over into other areas of your life.
Oh yeah.
I've always thought that, and this is one of those books too. There's so much great content out there that it's so hard to keep track of it all, where you get these ideas from.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
it's but I remember thinking about this a long time ago. Um, Something I realized in my own life is that discipline in one area of your life, you think it doesn't matter in other areas of your life, but it does. Like, so for
Yeah.
example, like if you're just, you know, undisciplined on something super trivial, like doing your laundry or whatever it is, you're just disorganized in that way. You don't think that's affecting your work because you go to the office and I'm super disciplined in the office, right? But you're shaping your thought patterns with everything you do.
Yep.
So even if it seems trivial, even if it seems this doesn't matter, I can slack off on that. No, what you're doing is you're training yourself to slack off in general, and
Yeah.
it'll make you more likely to be less disciplined in those other areas of your life. So you almost have to have a zero tolerance policy with discipline.
You do. You do. And knowing, and you need to put guardrails in there as well. So in
Hmm.
other words, to help your discipline along the way. And
Right.
they can be in all kinds of different ways. But if you don't add the guardrails, because we know discipline, willpower, like I said, that's going to fail. It's 100%. Your discipline, your willpower, and all that will fail at some point.
Yep.
So you need help reinforce it along the way.
I think that's Benjamin Hardy's main point in Willpower Doesn't Work. In fact, it's that you can't rely on willpower. You can't
Yeah.
rely on discipline. Instead, you like his argument is that your environment shapes you more than you
Hmm.
realize. We have this kind of modern, and I'm guilty of this,
Yeah.
for sure. This modern attitude of like, toughen up and just push through it.
Yep.
When in reality, if you look at the results and you look at what actually works, it's your environment shapes who you are more than your willpower does by a huge margin. So, for example, if you go to the grocery store, I'm just picking on donuts today for some reason, you just buy donuts and you put them in your kitchen and you just rely on your willpower to not eat those donuts, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, besides the fact that, let's say you're successful with that, there's another concept and I forget who to attribute this to, but that we have a limited supply of discipline
Yeah.
in us.
Yep.
And every time you use a little bit of it, you have a little bit less. And of course, it gets recharged. But if every time you walk by those donuts, you have to use discipline not to use them, at the end of the day, when it's time to have the discipline to go to the gym, you might be out of discipline, like,
Hmm. Hmm.
quota for the day. You used it all up every time you walk by those donuts. And you
Yeah.
might say, you know what, forget it.
I'll just
I'm
have
not going to
one.
go. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm just,
Or
yeah.
I'll eat the donuts or whatever it is. Right.
Yeah.
So what he says is like, um, architect your life and your environment in such a way to where you don't need motivation and you don't need discipline, right? Because you built that into the system.
Yep.
And so, for example, your kitchen is filled with the food that you want to be eating.
Hmm.
So it becomes very easy to go eat vegetables, you know, and it
Yeah.
becomes actually you're putting friction in to go eat donuts, because then you have to like go get in your car, drive to the donut shop, go buy donuts, do all of these things, right? It's like so much work that you you're basically you're making it so you could be lazy and make the right decisions.
Exactly. Because we're mentally lazy. We're lazy individuals by nature. I mean, we're
To some
humankind.
degree, yeah.
Yeah. We will always fall back. That was one of the reasons why when we were talking about being a mentor and giving the advice and the passion versus focusing on what you want and your goal on there, and then you have to double down to get to that goal. And the point that comes out of that is that most of the people are too lazy. There's the ones that are going to be ordinary, and they're too lazy to continue through.
And it's not their fault
And
because
it's
we're
not their
built that
fault.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're built that way. Yeah, and I'm not saying so they're not. It's not bad. It's just people take it across. It's there's another concept, and I'm sure Darren Hardigraff for somebody else, but he says they did a study and they said that people in a job they will work 25% of their capacity, and that's just meeting job requirement, and so there's 75% of their capacity that's untapped. And you get flashes of it when people, and I think we've talked about it before, but you get flashes of it when people are getting ready to go on vacation, when they're looking to it's a long weekend, it's Friday night, and they can just knock out this incredible amount of work, because they're motivated to do so.
Right.
But when it comes back on Monday, they're back to, okay, what do I need to do for the job? That's my 25%. I'm good. So it's always that key is, how do we unlock the rest of the potential? How
Right.
do we get them passionate about doing what else they want to do? But people, as a general rule, will do just what's needed. They're not, they're not out, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
On there.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And it's funny. You're reminding me of another concept. We're on a roll here. Mental energy and physical
Yeah,
energy
yeah.
as well. We like to think of it as like it's like a video game. We've got an energy meter and you deplete it, right?
Hmm.
It's funny because I was just talking about this with your discipline. I think it's true for discipline. I don't think it's true for energy per se. And a lot of, like with mental energy, it's kind of like the more you use, the more you get in a lot of
Yeah.
cases, right?
Yes.
I think this is true with content, with sharing ideas. Like a lot of people have great ideas and they won't share them because it's like, well, it's my idea. I don't want them to steal it, right? And what they do is they're putting like, mental handcuffs on themselves, right? Because if they were just to share those ideas, then more ideas would come. And
Hmm.
this is one thing that I learned at some point. It's like, if you have a great idea, you got to tell as many people as possible. You got to share that, not because it's the
Absolutely.
right thing to do, although it is the right thing to do, but even just for self-serving reasons. Because the more like you have ideas and you share them, the more great ideas you will have. It's not a
Exactly.
zero-sum game, you know.
Exactly.
And it's easy to see with physical exercise, right? The more you
Hmm.
exercise, the more energy you have.
Yep.
It's not like we got to conserve our energy and just sit on the couch all day. That's not how you get more energy.
No, because that's
The
the actual, that's the
opposite, right?
opposite. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
same. It's the same with creative work. The more creative you are, the more creative you will become in the future. This is one of the things that I've learned. This is something I learned relatively recently, and so that's another reason to share your content.
Yeah.
Um, You know, uh, you got to be willing to be vulnerable, but you also have to get it out there. And there's all these other little things, like you get feedback, right? And you get collaborators. There's all these great things that happen when you share your ideas. But so many people are held back because they just want to guard their ideas, like because
Mhm.
there's like it's a
They're hoarding their
scarcity
coconut.
mindset.
Yeah, scarcity mindset. They're hoarding their coconuts. I'm not
Mhm.
sharing with the rest of the tribe. These are my coconuts.
Yeah, but that scarcity mindset is super dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take a genius, give them a scarcity mindset, and they will like not do
Absolutely.
anything with their life,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And you could take someone with less genius and has like an abundance mindset and can create wonderful things, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, there are things that are within your control and things that aren't. Your genius levels largely out of your control. I mean, there's things you could do, I think, actually to increase your intelligence through I mean, it's basically like use it or lose it with your brain and your body.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's kind of genetics and environment and how you were raised and how you were educated and who are the people that influenced you early in your life and all of those things, right? So you can't go back and change those things. But what you can change is what you do now.
Exactly.